Вітаю! Мене звати Тарас Жовтенко, я безпековий аналітик фонду «Демократичні ініціативи» імені Ілька Кучерєва. Ви дивитеся подкаст «НАТО в деталях». Сьогодні зі мною Тім Полмаєр, координатор комплексного пакету допомоги представництва НАТО в Україні. Hi, Team. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you for agreeing to speak to our audience about NATO, about what NATO does to assist Ukraine, especially in this dire wartime situation. So I would like to talk to you about the actual and practical assistance which North Atlantic Treaty Alliance Organization gives to Ukraine and how it supports Ukraine in this wartime period. And so we all know about Ramstein. We all know about the individual assistance that alliance nations are giving to Ukraine, but it would be more interesting to speak about what NATO as an organization does to help and to assist Ukraine. So what are actually NATO organizational mechanisms which are working to support Ukrainian army, Ukrainian society, and Ukraine as a nation in the wartime?
First of all, thank you very much for having me today. Thank you for the invitation. Really appreciate this. NATO has got a number of mechanisms to support Ukraine at present. I think that the most obvious, the most visible that we have is the NATO representation here in Ukraine, in Kiev. We've been with Ukraine, we've been in Kiev for a long, long time. In fact, we've had since 1997 the NATO Information and Documentation Center, which had a focus on public diplomacy. We then, shortly afterwards, the NATO Liaison Office, which focused more on maintaining contact with the ministries and providing strategic advice. But after the Washington summit, the Secretary General of NATO has introduced a senior representative to the NRU here in Kiev, Mr. Patrick Turner. And our job here, we follow the mantra of win and join. So win and prevail in the war and join NATO. How are we doing this? We are at the NRU more in the join business, and we provide strategic advice. We focus heavily on capacity building, and we've got an instrument here which is called CAP, the Comprehensive Assistance Package, that helps us achieve this and heavily focus on interoperability of Ukraine with NATO. That's the long-term aspiration. So we've got the NRU here, and the second mechanism which I introduced is the Comprehensive Assistance Package. Again, this has been around for a long time, in fact, since the Warsaw Summit in 2016. But it has been expanded massively, obviously, after the full-scale invasion. With the Comprehensive Assistance Package, and we talk about $1 billion that we provide in one way or another to Ukraine. We focus on urgent non-lethal support, and here at the NRU on mid to long-term non-lethal support. So we talk about institutional transformation here. And we've got a number of initiatives and projects that come under CAP. So we do a lot of capacity building, and what capacity building in this forum means is that, for example, we have got humanitarian demining, a big project in several locations across Ukraine. We focus on what is called the Strategic Defense Procurement Review. We provide secure communications, a lot of C4 arrangements. So that is what we call capacity building, but there are a number of other project teams that we've got. One, for example, is Building Integrity. Building Integrity is a program by NATO which focuses on good governance, accountability, and transparency. I've got another program which is probably one of the lesser known, yet probably one of the most powerful, which is called the Defense Education Enhancement Project. With that, we provide education and training to officers, to non-commissioned officers, and to civilians. That can be a range of initiatives. It could be English language, it can be leadership programs, it can be decision-making. We support faculty development, we support curriculum development via this program. And lastly, what we do is something we call the human-centric framework, where we focus heavily on medical rehabilitation, on reconstruction, on veterans affairs, and military career transitioning. So that's one of those mechanisms. Another mechanism we've got is what you will have heard about, and that is about to be stood up, is the NSATU, NATO Security Assistance and Training to Ukraine. That is an organization that will sit in Wiesbaden and has got essentially three big pillars to support Ukraine. One is the coordination of procurement. Another one is to provide training, and something that focuses on a longer-term effort, future force development. We all understand Ukraine is at war. It's difficult to achieve at the moment, but the earlier we start thinking about this, the better we're in a position after the war. So those three pillars are being covered in the future by NSATU from Germany. What NSATU uses, at least partially, is the so-called pledge. And that was something that was decided at the Washington Summit this year in 2024, where allied nations pledge $40 billion US dollars on an annual basis in support of Ukraine. It's not being used by one organization specifically, but it focuses heavily on procurement and sometimes bilateral support to Ukraine. So NSATU is another mechanism, the 40 billion pledge as well. And then we've got something called the annual national program, which focuses a bit more on the political side of things. So it makes progress towards defense and security sector reform. It measures this on political and economic development, resources, security. And that is something that we assess on an annual basis. NATO will provide recommendations, and Ukraine will then produce this annual national program. And lastly, we've got something called JTAC, something that is also to NATO completely new. It is one of the Washington Summit deliverables, which is called the Joint Analysis Training and Education Center. And here, what makes it so unique, it is a joint endeavor between NATO and Ukraine, but it's also a civilian and military organization, which NATO has never done before. But there is a lot to be learned for both sides from the war in Ukraine. And we want to together be in a better position than we were before the war, so that we learn lessons, and whatever is being learned in terms of, it could be national resilience, it could be counter UAV or counter drone operations, that we transfer this as quickly as possible into doctrine, into strategy, into policy and future training to better prepare our armed forces for the future. So we've got 6 pillars, self-reinforcing, and the aim is to win and join.
Yeah, that's great. Tim, you've mentioned the mutual learning and the exchange of experience, especially the wartime experience and wartime practices. How did those NATO mechanisms that you've mentioned, how did they change and how did they transform in the view of this wartime experience and wartime developments?
Well, it's a continuous effort. It's probably in the nature of war that you expect something, but when it comes to action, everything changes. So we need to adapt in the same way. And what I mentioned with JTAC, that is something that serves for that purpose, that together we learn and transform this, the lessons learned into, or feed this into our training, education training institutions, so that future force or soldiers in the future are much better prepared and adaptable to the new threat.
If we speak about future, if we speak about the potential Ukrainian ascension into NATO, and if we speak about the way how we prepare to this ascension, and how we manage to analyze and interact with your experience. How would you see the future of NATO assistance to Ukraine in terms of our future ascension into alliance, and in terms that the security situation would be rather dire even if the war ends?
Well, we've got essentially two mechanisms that should help Ukraine to work towards the accession to NATO. One is what I mentioned before, the annual national plan, which works in cooperation between NATO allies and Ukraine, where we assess, recommend, and then implement. And there's another instrument we've got, which is called the interoperability roadmap. And that is something that is being used for future force development to make sure that as soon as possible, Ukraine is in a position where it's interoperable with NATO forces. We also have got a number of other organizations that do not strictly fall under NATO. And one, for example, is the UDCG, Defense Contact Group. That plays a vital part, which is we've got 8 capability coalitions that sit under the UDCG. For example, we've got specialists or nations that provide specialist support in the field of armor, in the field of IT, maritime security, or integrated missile defense. What we need to recognize, none of the organizations and mechanisms which we have institutionalized at the moment is redundant at some point. We need to make them become a complementary effort. For example, those capability coalitions only exist within the UDCG. We've got other mechanisms like programs for defense education. It doesn't exist only in there, nowhere else. So we need to form an organization that provides individual tailored support with a minimum of overlap, and that makes or provides consistent, coherent, and long-term support to Ukraine.
That's great. And one other question, which is connected to the Ramstein initiative and to the actually the strategy of the alliance to incorporate this Ramstein mechanism into the NATO mechanisms themselves. This is deemed to be one of the prospect mechanism for assisting a NATO ally who is not actually the member of the organization. So how do you see the future of this initiative, and how do you see how it would be transformed under the NATO auspices and under the NATO coordination?
So the UDCG is an organization where all NATO allies are represented. So we've got all 32 allies there. Plus, we've got another 25 nations who voluntarily joined the UDCG. And by the way, when we look at these, it's a total of 57 nations, which is about 30% of worldwide countries are represented there in support of Ukraine. As with every other organization that I mentioned before, we're here to stay, and we're here to help prevail in the war. We're here to win the war and provide a smooth transition for joining, for Ukraine's accession to NATO. This is nothing that will go away. It is there we're here for the long run.
And that's the best news we've
indeed,
got.
Indeed.
And so my last question is, we are asking this question to all of our experts and to all of our guests, and this is a short question and a short answer. So, is Ukraine capable to defend NATO?
Oh, it's absolutely, absolutely. What I said before, there is a lot to learn from both sides. Yeah, you're unfortunately in a very unique position here that we had hoped, we as NATO or individual countries had hoped to avoid. And we have to adapt to the situation, and unfortunately the lessons we learn together have a devastating effect on Ukraine, on Ukraine's population. So, yes, we learn together, unfortunately.
And we learn to get stronger and to be stronger together.
To be stronger together, indeed.
Thank you, team. Thank you, team.
Thank you very much for your time.
For this fantastic conversation. З вами був подкаст «НАТО в деталях». Мене звати Тарас Жовтенко. До зустрічі в наступних випусках.